Imagine you're told that to be a great leader, you must sometimes lie, betray, manipulate, and even kill. You'd probably feel shocked, or at least uncomfortable. But what if someone told you that the survival of your country, your people, or your very way of life depended on it? That's the moral crossroad where Niccolò Machiavelli begins his bold and unsettling journey into political philosophy. Born in 1469 in Florence, Italy, Machiavelli is often remembered as the man who wrote The Prince, a book that turned the world of politics upside down. To this day, his name is used to describe cunning, ruthless, and strategic behavior, what we call Machiavellian. But that's only part of the story. Behind that reputation is a thinker who was deeply concerned with the realities of power and leadership. He didn't try to sugarcoat politics. Instead, he asked one hard question that still echoes today. What actually works when you're trying to lead people? Machiavelli didn't care for fairy tales about perfect rulers or imaginary utopias. He wasn't interested in what a leader should do in a perfect world. He was focused on what a leader must do in a flawed and unpredictable one. His world was filled with betrayal, foreign invasions, political backstabbing, and shifting alliances. It was a time when being too kind could get you killed and your entire country conquered. So instead of writing about ideal heroes, Machiavelli wrote about survivors. This video explores the heart of Machiavelli's philosophy. We'll look at how his brutal honesty came from the violent and chaotic world he lived in. We'll explore his famous ideas, like whether it's better to be feared or loved, and how they challenge our view of leadership and morality. Along the way, we'll use real historical and modern examples to bring his ideas to life, and we'll ask ourselves a question that Machiavelli forces us to face. Can a good person ever truly be a great leader? Whether you agree with him or not, one thing's clear. Machiavelli understood power in a way that still shapes the world today. Historical and political background. To understand Machiavelli's philosophy, we need to look closely at the world he lived in, a world where politics was a battlefield, alliances were shaky, and power changed hands almost overnight. Italy during the late 15th and early 16th centuries was nothing like the unified country we know today. Instead, it was a patchwork of city-states, Florence, Venice, Milan, Naples, and the Papal States, all competing for influence and survival. These city-states were constantly at war, not just with each other, but also with powerful foreign kingdoms like France and Spain. Florence, Machiavelli's home, was a cultural center bursting with art and ideas, the very heart of the Renaissance. But politically, it was unstable and dangerous. The Medici family, a wealthy and influential banking dynasty, had ruled Florence for decades. However, in 1494, the Medici were overthrown and a new republic was established. This is when Machiavelli entered public life. At just 29 years old, he became a diplomat and a key advisor in the Florentine government. For 14 years, he traveled to courts across Europe, met powerful rulers, and observed firsthand how power was gained, used, and lost. He admired strong leaders who knew how to control their image and make bold moves. One of his most striking examples was Cesare Borgia, the ruthless son of Pope Alexander VI. Borgia used cunning, violence, and strategic alliances to conquer central Italy. Machiavelli met him personally and watched him in action. Although Borgia's rule ended in failure, Machiavelli believed that for a moment he had done everything right, a near-perfect example of how a prince should behave in a treacherous world. But Machiavelli's career collapsed as quickly as it rose. In 1512, the Medici returned to power with help from Spanish forces and dismantled the Republic. Machiavelli was arrested, tortured, and exiled. Stripped of his political role, he retreated to his small estate outside Florence. It was during this exile that he wrote The Prince, his most famous and controversial work. It wasn't just a book. It was a desperate attempt to prove his worth and get back into politics. This period of loss and humiliation shaped his writing deeply. Gone was any belief that power could be maintained through kindness or moral goodness alone. He had seen too much betrayal and bloodshed to believe in idealism. For Machiavelli, the chaotic politics of Italy were not an exception. They were the rule. And if rulers wanted to survive, they had to be willing to get their hands dirty. In this storm of instability, Machiavelli wasn't trying to create monsters. He was trying to create survivors. His book wasn't written in a vacuum. It was forged in fire, in wars, conspiracies, and personal failure. That's why The Prince feels so raw and urgent. It's not a dream. It's a wake-up call. Machiavelli's core philosophy: realism over idealism. At the heart of Machiavelli's thinking is a single, powerful belief. Politics is not about how the world should work, but how it does work. This may seem obvious today, but in his time, it was revolutionary. Most political thinkers before him, especially in Europe, were still guided by religious or philosophical ideals. They believed rulers should be wise, just, and moral, governed by the same ethics as ordinary people. Machiavelli threw that out the window. He believed that idealism in politics was dangerous because it made leaders blind to reality. People don't always reward virtue. Crowds can be fickle. Allies can betray you. Morality won't stop an invading army. According to Machiavelli, a ruler who tries to be good all the time is likely to lose everything. Instead, he urged leaders to be realists, to study human nature as it is, not as we wish it to be. This is where Machiavelli introduces two of his most famous concepts, virtù and fortuna, power versus fate. Virtù, not to be confused with virtue in the moral sense, is the ability of a leader to shape their own destiny. It means boldness, strength, intelligence, and skill, the personal qualities that allow a ruler to seize opportunities and control events. Think of it like a mix of courage, cleverness, and force. Fortuna, on the other hand, is fortune or luck, the unpredictable side of life that no one can control. In Machiavelli's eyes, fortune is like a wild river. When calm, it can be crossed safely, but during a storm, it floods and destroys everything in its path. A wise leader, he said, doesn't sit back and wait for fortune to be kind. Instead, they build dams, change course, and prepare for the worst. In his words, fortune is a woman, and it is necessary, if you wish to master her, to conquer her by force. It's a bold image, almost violent, but the message is clear. You can't trust the world to hand you success. You have to take it. Adapt or die. Another cornerstone of Machiavelli's thought is adaptability. He believed that no single strategy works forever. A leader must be like a fox and a lion, the fox to recognize traps, and the lion to frighten off wolves. In other words, be clever when you need to and forceful when you must. He admired people like Cesare Borgia because they were flexible. Borgia used both charm and cruelty to get what he wanted. At one point, he even hired a brutal enforcer named Ramiro de Orco to restore order through violence. Then, once peace was restored, Borgia had him executed and displayed in public. Why? To win the people's trust and show that cruelty would not be tolerated after it had already served its purpose. To many, this sounds horrifying, but to Machiavelli, it was brilliant. Borgia didn't kill for fun. He killed for control. He used fear wisely, then removed the source of fear. That, Machiavelli believed, was the difference between a tyrant and a survivor, the cold logic of leadership. All of this leads to one of Machiavelli's most unsettling truths. Being good doesn't guarantee success, and sometimes being bad is necessary. This doesn't mean a leader should be evil for no reason, but they should be ready to act immorally when the situation demands it. A ruler who is too kind may be loved but overthrown. One who lies, cheats, and manipulates, but wins, will be remembered as effective. This is where Machiavelli parts ways with philosophers like Plato, who dreamed of noble philosopher kings. For Machiavelli, nobility is fine, if you survive. If not, your goodness dies with you. In the end, Machiavelli's core philosophy is built on a hard but deeply emotional truth. Life isn't fair, and power is fragile. The world doesn't reward those who wait politely. It rewards those who understand it and aren't afraid to take it on, flaws, chaos, and all. Fear versus love. Which is more reliable? Perhaps the most famous and controversial idea in The Prince is this: it is much safer to be feared than loved if one must choose. Machiavelli didn't say rulers should be hated or cruel without reason. He warned against being seen as a monster, but he believed that fear is a more stable emotion than love. People may love a ruler today and turn against them tomorrow. But fear, especially when paired with respect, keeps people in line. He gives this example: a prince who is too generous might win love, but will quickly run out of resources and then be hated when he has to raise taxes. A ruler who is fair but firm, someone who punishes only when needed and avoids cruelty for its own sake, will be respected and feared, but not despised. Fear with boundaries is power. Love without strength is weakness. The morality of power. Is it okay to be ruthless? One of the hardest questions Machiavelli asks, without flinching, is this: can a leader do evil things for a good reason? In The Prince, he makes it clear that sometimes the answer is yes. In fact, sometimes it may be the only option. To many people, this sounds brutal or even monstrous. But to Machiavelli, it was simply honest. Machiavelli separates private morality from public duty. In our personal lives, we try to be kind, fair, and honest. But when you're ruling a country, those same rules can become dangerous. If you hesitate to act because you want to be seen as good, you might lose your throne. Or worse, your people might suffer. So while most moral traditions say that lying, violence, and betrayal are always wrong, Machiavelli asks, what if those things can actually save lives? What if a ruler who refuses to be ruthless ends up allowing even more destruction? The ends justify the means. Machiavelli never actually wrote the famous line, "The ends justify the means," but this idea runs throughout The Prince. He believed that a leader must focus on results, not intentions. If your goal is to protect the state, then even cruel or dishonest actions can be justified if they lead to peace, unity, or security. Let's look at a real-world example: Winston Churchill during World War II. Churchill made decisions that were morally complicated, such as allowing German bombing raids to hit certain towns without warning civilians in order to protect secret intelligence operations. These choices were heartbreaking, but Machiavelli would argue that Churchill did what was necessary to win the war and save millions in the long run. Is that moral? Is it cruel? Or is it both? Machiavelli's point isn't that leaders should be heartless. It's that they must be ready to make painful choices when the situation demands it. Waiting for the perfect, kind solution may mean there's no solution left at all. Good versus effective. A painful divide. This is where Machiavelli's philosophy becomes emotionally difficult. We want to believe that good people make good leaders. We want heroes who are honest, kind, and just. But history often tells another story. Many leaders who are remembered as great, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, even Abraham Lincoln, had to make decisions that caused immense pain and sacrifice. Machiavelli forces us to face this uncomfortable truth. He doesn't celebrate cruelty. He doesn't promote violence for fun or manipulation for its own sake. But he says clearly, if you are not willing to do what is necessary, someone else will, and they might not have your people's best interests at heart. His view of leadership is cold, but it's also full of realism. He sees power as a fragile thing, easily lost in the hands of someone too gentle, too trusting, or too slow. In his world, and maybe in ours, great leaders must carry heavy burdens, often alone. In today's world, we can see versions of this idea play out. Some leaders try to be everyone's friend, avoiding hard decisions to stay popular. Others take bold, unpopular steps that may be harsh, but effective. Think about leaders during a pandemic who enforced strict lockdowns. Some were praised, others were hated, but many were effective in saving lives. Machiavelli would say, don't judge them by how kind they seemed. Judge them by the outcome. What he says about human nature. If there's one idea that shapes everything in Machiavelli's philosophy, it's this. People are not as good as they pretend to be. For Machiavelli, understanding human nature wasn't just useful, it was essential for survival. He believed that most people are selfish, short-sighted, ungrateful, and easily influenced. This is not exactly a cheerful view of humanity, but in Machiavelli's experience, it was the truth. He had seen the chaos of war, the collapse of governments, and the way even close allies could turn into enemies overnight. He watched powerful families lie, bribe, and kill to protect their interests. He witnessed how quickly people could turn on their leaders when things went wrong. From all this, he reached one conclusion. If a ruler puts too much faith in people's goodness, they will be destroyed. Trust carefully, or not at all in the prince. Machiavelli warns rulers never to rely entirely on the loyalty of others. Allies might help you when it's easy, but when danger comes, they'll often run. People will praise you when you succeed and abandon you when you fail. That's why he insists that leaders must be cautious with trust, prepared for betrayal, and always ready to protect themselves. Take, for example, the story of the Florentine Republic. When Florence was threatened, its citizens initially rallied behind the government. But as things became harder, when sacrifices had to be made, the same people who shouted for freedom began turning on the leaders. Machiavelli watched this happen firsthand. For him, it was proof that public opinion is like the wind. It shifts quickly, and it cannot be the foundation of a stable state. Even more dangerously, people can be easily manipulated. Machiavelli suggests that appearances matter more than truth. If a ruler seems honest, brave, or generous, people will believe it, even if it's not entirely real. Most people, he says, judge with their eyes, not their minds, so a smart leader focuses not just on what they do, but on how it looks to others. This may sound like a call for deception, and in some ways it is. But it's also a call for awareness. Machiavelli isn't encouraging rulers to lie just for fun. He's warning them that others will lie, and that naive honesty can be dangerous. Is this cynical or just honest? It's easy to see Machiavelli's view of human nature as dark and depressing. He assumes the worst in people. He doesn't believe they can be trusted or that they'll do the right thing just because it's right. But maybe he's not trying to be cynical. Maybe he's trying to protect leaders from false hope. Imagine being a ruler who truly believes everyone will act with integrity. You give your rivals the benefit of the doubt. You share power. You open your gates to your enemies in the name of peace. And then they stab you in the back. Machiavelli would say, this isn't a surprise, it's reality. There's also a strange kind of compassion in his harshness. He doesn't expect people to be angels. He doesn't shame them for being flawed. He simply builds a political system that works despite their flaws. Instead of pretending people are better than they are, he builds strategies around the truth. Modern proof. Are we really so different? Look at the world today. In politics, business, and even relationships, trust is important, but it's not automatic. Leaders today still use image, persuasion, and control to maintain power. Companies hire PR teams to manage their public image. Politicians craft every word to appeal to emotions. Social media is full of people presenting idealized versions of themselves. In a way, we are still living in Machiavelli's world, one where perception can be more powerful than fact. Consider how voters react to scandals. A well-timed apology, a strong press conference, or a clever shift in focus can save a career. It's not always about truth, it's about how people feel. Machiavelli understood this long before modern media existed. He would not be shocked by today's politics. He would say, "I told you so." In the end, Machiavelli's view of human nature is hard to accept because it strips away the stories we like to tell ourselves. But he doesn't do it to destroy hope. He does it to prepare leaders for the real world, a world full of ambition, fear, and unpredictability. If people are flawed, Machiavelli says, then great leadership begins not in idealism, but in clear-eyed understanding. Machiavellianism today. Why it still matters. Even though Niccolò Machiavelli lived over 500 years ago, his ideas still echo all around us. You can find them in political campaigns, corporate boardrooms, international negotiations, and even TV dramas. That's because the kind of power struggles he described in The Prince haven't disappeared, they've just changed shape. The world may be more modern, but human nature, ambition, fear, and the hunger for control are still very much alive. Machiavelli's philosophy has become so influential that we now have a word for it: Machiavellianism. In everyday language, it refers to cunning, manipulative, and often ruthless behavior aimed at achieving personal or political goals. It's usually used in a negative way, but Machiavelli himself never told leaders to be cruel without reason. What he actually said was this: be feared, be smart, be in control, but never be hated for no purpose. Modern politics, the Machiavellian playbook. Think about how modern politicians behave. During elections, they craft powerful messages that appeal to emotions, not just facts. They often make promises they know they can't fully keep. They speak to people's fears, ambitions, and loyalties. Some bend the truth or change their positions to gain support. And behind the scenes, deals, compromises, strategy meetings, just like in Machiavelli's day. One of the clearest examples of Machiavellian tactics in recent history is Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States. Nixon was known for his intelligence and political skill, but also for his secrecy, manipulation, and deep desire to control public perception. His downfall came with the Watergate scandal, a classic case of trying to protect power through deception. Machiavelli might say Nixon understood how to play the game, but failed to keep it hidden enough to survive. On the flip side, consider Barack Obama, who maintained a carefully controlled public image while navigating incredibly difficult political terrain. He was admired for his calm and charm, but he also used strategic silence, negotiation, and even drone warfare to achieve his goals. Machiavelli wouldn't necessarily call him Machiavellian in the sinister sense, but he might call him effective, a ruler who balanced appearance with action. In business, strategy over sentiment. Machiavellian thinking isn't limited to politics. It's just as present in the corporate world. CEOs and executives often make harsh decisions, layoffs, mergers, competition crushing, not because they want to hurt people, but because they believe it's necessary for the company's survival. In a competitive environment, emotion can't always win over logic. Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, is a famous example. He was visionary, driven, and at times ruthless. He was known to fire employees on the spot, shut down entire projects, and control every detail of Apple's image. Some called him cruel, others called him brilliant. Machiavelli would likely say, he had virtù. He understood power and used it to shape the future. Pop culture, we love the cunning hero. It's no coincidence that some of our favorite characters in books, movies, and TV shows are those who understand power and know how to play the game. These are often Machiavellian figures, not because they're evil, but because they are strategic, adaptable, and clever. Think of Tyrion Lannister in Game of Thrones. He survives in a deadly world not through strength, but through intelligence. He lies when he must, tells the truth when it benefits him, and is always calculating. Or Frank Underwood in House of Cards, a character who seems almost ripped directly from the pages of The Prince. Even if we don't admire these characters' actions, we admire their skill. Why do we love watching them? Because they speak to something we recognize. Power is a game, and the rules aren't always fair. Should we be Machiavellian? This is the uncomfortable part. If Machiavelli's ideas still apply, does that mean we should be manipulative to succeed? Should we stop believing in honesty, kindness, or fairness? Machiavelli never said morality was worthless. He said morality is not enough. He believed that good people could still be strong leaders if they were willing to be realistic and make tough choices. You don't have to be a monster, but you do have to be ready for monsters. In today's world, understanding Machiavellian ideas doesn't mean approving of them blindly. It means being aware of how power operates so we can protect ourselves, make wiser choices, and, maybe, find ways to lead more honestly in a dishonest world. In the end, Machiavelli's ideas still matter because the world hasn't changed as much as we like to think. His lessons are warnings, not instructions. And if we listen closely, they don't just teach us how to win, they teach us how to survive without losing our soul. The misunderstood philosopher. Was Machiavelli evil? Over the centuries, Machiavelli's name has become almost a curse word. To call someone Machiavellian is to say they're cold, manipulative, even wicked. But was that really who Niccolò Machiavelli was? Did he write The Prince to promote cruelty and tyranny? Or is it possible that we've completely misunderstood him? Many people read The Prince and assume Machiavelli admired tyrants. After all, he seems to praise rulers who deceive, kill, and manipulate to gain power. He shows how to use fear to control people, how to betray alliances at the right time, and how to lie without shame if it helps maintain control. But what if that wasn't his message at all? What if Machiavelli wasn't trying to encourage evil, but trying to describe the world as it really is? The context we ignore. To understand Machiavelli's true intentions, we have to go beyond The Prince and look at his other writings, especially the discourses on Livy. In that book, which is much longer and less well known, he praises republican government, citizen participation, and laws that protect freedom. He clearly believed that a republic was the best form of government. So why write The Prince, which seems to glorify dictatorship? The answer may lie in his personal situation. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince, he had just been exiled from political life after the Medici family returned to power in Florence. He had lost everything, his job, his status, his dignity. He was desperate to return to politics. Some historians believe The Prince was actually written as a gift to the Medicis, a kind of political resume to prove that he still had value. In other words, it may have been a performance, a dark mirror showing them what kind of ruler they could become if they wanted to stay in power. But even if The Prince was sincere, it doesn't mean Machiavelli loved cruelty. It means he thought cruelty was sometimes necessary, and that ignoring it could lead to even greater suffering. In a world of backstabbing politics and endless war, he believed truth was better than comfort, and the truth was, nice rulers often lose. The lonely truth-teller. Machiavelli's honesty is what makes him so uncomfortable to read. He doesn't dress up his ideas in beautiful language or pretend that people are noble when they're not. He tells leaders exactly what they're up against and what they may have to do to survive. In that way, he's not evil. He's simply brutally honest. This makes Machiavelli a deeply emotional figure. You can feel the frustration in his writing, the heartbreak of watching his beloved Florence fall, the sadness of being cast aside after years of loyal service, and the loneliness of being the only one willing to tell the truth. He writes with the voice of someone who has seen too much to believe in fairy tales. In fact, some modern scholars argue that Machiavelli was one of the first political realists, not a monster, but a pioneer. He stripped politics of illusion so that leaders could face it head-on. He wanted order, not chaos, stability, not idealism. If people couldn't be perfect, then leaders had to find ways to govern the imperfect. Protecting the state, not destroying it. When Machiavelli talks about using force or deception, he almost always frames it in terms of protecting the state. He believed that a strong, unified government was the only way to stop Italy from being torn apart by invaders and internal conflict. In that sense, his philosophy wasn't about glorifying power, it was about guarding peace. He didn't tell princes to be cruel for fun. He told them to be cruel only when necessary and to do it quickly and efficiently, then stop. A bad ruler in his eyes wasn't the one who was feared, it was the one who was hated for no reason. That kind of distinction matters. It shows that Machiavelli wasn't careless with his advice. He was careful, precise, calculated. And that precision was meant to serve a higher goal, survival, not just of the prince, but of the people. In the end, calling Machiavelli evil misses the point. He wasn't trying to destroy morality. He was trying to make space for it in a world that didn't follow the rules. He was the philosopher of the battlefield, the courtroom, the crisis, the one who asked, "What do you do when doing the right thing isn't enough?" And maybe, just maybe, that makes him one of the most human thinkers of all. Bringing all the ideas together, Niccolò Machiavelli is not an easy thinker to love. His ideas make us uncomfortable. He challenges everything we want to believe about leadership, goodness, and power. He doesn't promise that truth will always win or that kindness will always be rewarded. Instead, he holds up a mirror to the real world and asks us to look, really look, at what power costs. In The Prince, Machiavelli writes with the urgency of someone who has watched too many good people fall. He strips away illusions and offers raw, practical advice. To some, this makes him sound cold. But if you read him closely, you see something deeper. A man who cared deeply about his country, who hated chaos, and who wanted peace, even if peace came at a painful price. Throughout this video, we've explored how Machiavelli's world shaped his thinking. He didn't invent corruption, betrayal, or war. He lived through it. He didn't try to make people worse. He tried to protect rulers from being destroyed by trusting that people were better than they are. His philosophy wasn't an invitation to evil. It was a manual for survival. We've looked at the heart of his philosophy, that a leader must focus on results, not just intentions, that people are flawed, and so leadership must be flexible, bold, and even ruthless at times, that power must be protected, and illusion is often just as important as truth. We've seen how his ideas continue to influence modern politics, business, and storytelling, and how even today Machiavelli's cold logic still explains the choices leaders make when the stakes are high. And we've asked the question, can a good person be a great leader? Machiavelli never gives a simple answer. Instead, he offers a haunting truth. Sometimes to protect what's good, you must be ready to do what's not. This isn't a philosophy for dreamers, it's a philosophy for those brave enough to face the world as it is, not as they wish it to be. And in that sense, Machiavelli isn't just a thinker for rulers, he's a thinker for all of us. For anyone who has had to make hard choices, who has been disappointed by others, who has had to balance heart and mind. We may never agree with everything Machiavelli wrote, we may not want to, but if we truly want to understand how power works, and how to lead without being broken by it, then we can't afford to ignore him. He didn't write to tell us what we wanted to hear. He wrote to tell us what we needed to know. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more deep content. We cover philosophies of life,